back to the Bliss feed. This is part 2 of the back to school series. Last time we talked about time management, especially when it comes to online classes. We covered time blocking, multitasking, routines, setting up your study space, etc. In this video, we're going to talk about science-backed, tried and tested, guaranteed to work within 90 days or your money back, study techniques to help you learn more efficiently. Because especially when you're doing online classes from home, it's very easy to let schoolwork fill up your entire day. Like Parkinson's law states, work expands to fill the time that you have available for it. So instead, if you set yourself little goals, if you set yourself little time limits, and you implement techniques to help you get stuff done within those time limits, then you will win at school and at life. So hopefully you took notes on last week's video and studied up. The Pomodoro technique is just one way that you can structure your study time. It is 25 minutes of super intense, focused, distraction-free work time, alternated with 5 minutes of break time. If you trust MIT, they recommend hour-long sessions for anything that's super focused, like solving problems or writing papers, and then shorter sessions for memorization and review. Different studies will all say different things, so you do you and experiment to find the intervals of time that work for you for different kinds of work. Set yourself a little goal for what you want to get done during that interval of time, and then once the timer goes off, enjoy your break and try to power off your brain in some way. What is active recall? Well, first of all, active recall is not passively studying, just reviewing your notes, staring at them, and hoping they'll burn into your retinas. It's not sleeping with your textbook under your pillow, hoping to absorb the information through osmosis. Sorry, honey, it doesn't work like that. Active recall is basically when you quiz yourself, when your brain has to come up with the answer on its own. So in this study done in 2013, practice testing, just another way to say active recall, basically received a high utility rating, while other techniques like summarization, rereading, and highlighting received low utility ratings. So if you're doing flashcards, this sounds pretty obvious, but try to guess the answer before you flip the card. If you're reviewing notes, cover them and try to remember as much as you can before you go back and fill in whatever you missed. Or pretend you're a teacher and you're explaining stuff out loud to a class. If you visualized how your brain retains learned information over time, it would look like a curve. This is called the forgetting curve. When you first learn something, as more time passes, the more you forget. However, every time you review that information, you bring yourself back up to here and reset the forgetting curve. But now the decay happens slower. Now you remember it for a whole week before you reach that point again. You review it again, now you remember it for a whole month. Spaced repetition is basically how you beat the forgetting curve, reviewing more frequently at first and then less and less frequently as the information becomes solidified in your brain. So this applies to note-taking and reviewing your notes. So for example, you take your notes in class, you copy and condense them that evening, and then you review them the next day, in 3 days, in a week. And it also applies to flashcards, so in that case, each card gets reviewed in increasingly longer intervals. But like at this point, I have 1,845 Korean flashcards, and I do not feel like managing all those little pieces of paper, so I prefer to use digital flashcards. They keep track of your learning schedule for each card for you. It shows you exactly what you need to review, when you need to review it, and it takes up exactly 0 space. So after my language learning video, my super successful language learning video, a lot of people reached out to me to ask me to elaborate on how I set up my Anki cards, because I did use a little bit of HTML and CSS magic to customize them, but I can imagine that if you didn't have experience with that, then it would be quite confusing and intimidating, and you probably just want to start learning. You don't want to be learning programming. So the sponsor of today's video, Smart Cards Plus, is a really simple and beautiful alternative to Anki, and I promise you won't need to learn any programming skills to set it up. You probably won't even need to read the instructions. Like Anki, you can use it to create different decks and organize them into folders. You can add text, images, and audio files to your flashcards. You can actually even import your Anki decks into Smart Cards if you started in Anki or in Quizlet, and it even imports your study history, so it'll pick up right where you left off. Every time you open the app, it'll show you exactly what cards you need to review based on what you're most likely to forget soon. So if you're waiting in line, you have time between classes, you can just pull out your phone, do some quick review, and those little bits of very targeted studying on exactly the material that it knows your brain is about to forget will make sure that you don't forget anything. All of the features of Smart Cards Plus are totally free to use with ad support. If you want to remove the ads, it's just $9.99 for a year. But for a limited time, because you are Bliss Bean viewers and you deserve it, it's 30% off. So if you want to try Smart Cards, the link is in the description. You might know this quote, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is a sign of insanity.
Nothing changes if nothing changes, right?
So when I first started studying Korean, I thought that I could get words into my memory by simply testing myself on them enough times, but no matter how many times I repeated the same words, I just kept forgetting them and it got really frustrating. Finally, I realized that instead of just repetition, I needed to be making some sort of a personal connection in my brain, and we'll talk more about the types of connections in the next section. But after I started doing that, it took me longer initially to learn a vocab word because a lot of times I had to sit there and try to come up with a good memory trick. But then once I did that, I only had to review the word like 3 times to learn it permanently instead of 176 times. So it definitely saved me time in the long run. So if you're finding that you're just not getting something, whether it's memorization or grasping a concept or you're stuck on writing an essay, stop sinking time into what isn't working. Step away from your work, take a break, and ask yourself, what am I currently doing that is not working? Can I find a different resource that might be able to help? A lot of times just hearing something explained in a different way is really helpful. Can I ask someone for help? Can they introduce a fresh perspective that might help me understand? Can I change my study routine? Maybe you've been doing all of your review the night before the quiz, but if you did some studying the night after the class, your memorization would improve. And do I simply need a break? At the end of the day, it could just be that your brain is tired. So in the same way that habit stacking, something we've talked about on this channel, connects new habits to older, already established ones, you can memorize new information by making a personal connection to things that you already know well. These can be mental images or something that sounds similar and reminds you of something. So for example, the Korean word 피곤하다 means to be tired. 피 means blood in Korean, and 곤 sounds like gone. So if all of your blood is gone, you'll probably be tired. You'll also probably be dead. 지리 means geography, and because I'm very bad at geography, I have to ask Siri for help. 지리, Siri, get it? Another memorization technique is called the memory palace or the mind palace. So if you're trying to connect new information to old familiar information, well, what's more familiar to you than your own house? So in the memory palace technique, you basically have to design a route walking through your house, through different rooms of your house, and a couple of specific locations in each of those rooms. So maybe in your mind, you walk into your kitchen, you look in the sink, on top of the stove, inside the oven, inside the refrigerator, and inside the freezer. Then you connect some sort of visual cue to each piece of information. So when I was learning about this technique, it was in the context of trying to memorize a deck of cards. So maybe the 7 of cards reminds you of a ring that you have that has, did I just say the 7 of cards? The 7 of diamonds reminds you of a ring that you have that has 7 diamonds in it. And then you place each of those items in a location. So maybe you imagine yourself opening the oven and there is just a diamond ring sitting there. Then once you've put everything away in your memory palace, you can visualize yourself taking that entire route through your house, looking in every single location, and bring up every single piece of information. So those are the basics of the technique. If it sounds interesting to you, you can search online, and people have come up with incredible ways to expand this technique and apply it to all sorts of different subjects. For memorization, you can also try to get as many of your senses involved in the process as possible. When I study, I like to talk out loud to myself a lot. I also talk in a British accent for some reason. I don't know why. When I'm trying to understand some sort of a process, I like to just talk it out and use my hands a lot. This is why I normally study in my room. I don't go to libraries or anything like that because I would get kicked out probably. So for example, when I'm studying Korean, I'll see an image on the screen. I have to use active recall to remember the word. I flip the flashcard and I see the word, I hear the word, I say the word myself, I write down the word. The only thing I don't do is I don't smell or taste the word. But there have been studies done on taste and smell and how they're related to studying. So you might want to try picking like a new flavor of gum or some new essential oil, smelling that or eating that. Eating the gum and smelling the essential oil, not vice versa. while you're studying and then also while you're taking the exam. And that kind of like programs your brain to connect the information. Science, wow. Humans are just naturally lazy. We want to conserve our energy and we want to boost our confidence by doing stuff that's easy. So we procrastinate on difficult projects by reorganizing our home screens. When we study, we have this tendency to focus on what we already know well because reviewing material that comes easily just makes you feel good. But we only grow when we're pushing our limits, right? So you have to actually apply what you know. When you're doing flashcards, set aside the ones that are getting easy, drill the ones that you're getting wrong. If you're doing practice problems, skip over the ones that you feel confident about and go straight to the difficult ones. And do practice problems, practice exams, practice essays, etc. I know that taking tests and writing essays sucks, so it's like, why would you put yourself through more of that than you have to? But it's a really good way to test your active recall, to study the exact types of questions that will actually be on the test, and also to measure your progress. So you really want to try recreating those test-taking conditions as much as possible. If you're not going to be allowed to use your calculator on the chemistry exam, don't use your calculator. If you're going to have a certain amount of time for a set of problems, set yourself a timer. For things like AP exams, I think it's really important to take at least one full practice exam because AP exams are exhausting. So it's really good to have like a practice run to test your mental stamina. How is it going to feel to take a test for 3 hours and then finish that by writing 3 long essays? How are you going to manage not only your time, but also your energy throughout this exam? And finally, take some time to create a schedule for yourself. Make it specific, so identify exactly what it is you need to do, which chapters do you need to read, which practice problems do you have to do. Space it out because that is much better for your long-term memory than cramming it all at the end. Keep it light because if you overwhelm yourself and don't leave yourself any time to rest and recharge, you'll be much less likely to stick to the schedule. And get creative. So please do not try to take practice exams while you're driving to school, but maybe on the bus ride to school, you can do your daily smart cards review. So because reviewing is the key to learning, to sum up, today we learned about taking regular breaks, active recall, the forgetting curve and spaced repetition, how to change your study methods if something isn't working, memorization techniques like creating personal connections, the memory palace, and involving your senses, why you should focus on what is difficult, doing practice problems, and creating a schedule. Thank you for coming to my class. Your homework is to try out Smart Cards Plus. The ad-free version is 30% off for a limited time, so head to the link in my description to test your active recall and spaced repetition. Good luck in the next school year. You got this. I will see you next week. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!